get really good content for your podcast series.
Ready? Live from New York at the biggest show in legal technology, this is your friendly neighborhood TECHNOCAT, and this is TECHNOCAT Live. I am here with Jaime Raba from Seyfarth Shaw, and we are rounding out the day 2 of Legalweek. What's your take? What's your vibe? What are you seeing?
Well, I mean, this has been such an interesting legal week. A lot of feature drops from a lot of our favorite individuals. Everyone's talking about generative AI right now.
Which, I'll be honest, I mean, I'm all in on AI, and I have been probably for like a decade or more. I am shocked by the changing the guard, like the mentality shifting so quickly in 6 months since the December drop of OpenAI's GPT 3.5.
Right. And here we are at GPT-4, the integration with Bing. And now we're seeing the integration with the Office products. And we're also seeing Google's Bard entering an open beta. And we're seeing some loose integration with other Google products. But on the e-discovery side, we used to have to drag people into AI kicking and screaming.
I mean, clawing the floor as we pulled them across, yeah.
And now everybody's like, where's my AI? Where's my chat GPT? And so I think this is going to be a great gateway drug to finally get people into AI land, even if it is just a change in the interface. Because a lot of the core features that large language models can access can still be a lot of the core features in our platforms, but it can be a sort of real shift in the user interface that's going to be available.
I mean, you have to make it iPhone easy, and
that's
sort of like with Google, if people understood the plethora of algorithms powering that one little search box, they'd be spooked. But because they can write all their typos and just write a message in there and get results, they're not thinking of that. It's sort of iPhone easy.
Absolutely. It really is the iPhone that became the thing that made technology less scary for a lot of folks who were adverse to technology. And I think as our applications have more intuitive interfaces, we are not going to have to drag people kicking and screaming. And in fact, it's going to be so easy that people will stop asking the crazy questions, which really are just excuses not to use technology.
Exactly. Well, and I think at some point we're not going to have the AI workflow or the AI X, Y, or Z. It's just going to be, all right, we have really good technology powering the end result of X.
Absolutely. Absolutely. But I mean, some of your previous panelists have raised, interviewees have raised, a lot of the security and sort of proprietary issues involved in, using some of the generative AI. And I think it's really important to use the one that is covered by the right data use agreements, and that isn't an open beta that is supposed to be used for research purposes and they own your data. Clearly your client data should not be going into such a place.
Well, and I mean, the interesting thing is this isn't the first large language model. It's not the first
Absolutely
rodeo.
not.
We've got BERT and MBERT baked in. There's a ton of powerful stuff, but that was proprietary. I own my data. I don't have to give away the secret sauce. My hope, though, is OpenAI will get there. I think they're sort of seeing the issues and working on improving the T's and C's. I just am waiting to see when they do.
Well, they're taking the punches in the face right now for the whole industry.
Yes, yeah.
So, especially, after Google's interesting launch of Bard, where they didn't really even Google what the output was in their scripted events. Sorry, guys.
Garbage in, garbage out, a little bit.
No, but I mean, everybody gets excited. There's so much going on, and you've laid off a lot of your workforce.
I am not commenting. I plead the fifth.
And I'm not commenting on anything either. But nonetheless, it's an interesting moment we find ourselves in. And interestingly, OpenAI is doing a great job introducing this technology that's going to be available in a lot of different flavors, formats, and different providers, where we're going to be able to exploit what it is superpowered at, which is basically summarizing. And then we are going to be able to allow it to synchronize with systems that have more specific computational abilities. Although I will say GPT-4 as a backend has much more sophisticated computational abilities than GPT 3.5, but there's no substitute for things that are that has its specific purpose, computation and evaluation under specific frameworks.
I mean, I think that makes a ton of sense. You want to be using the technology for what it's optimized for, not for everything. And you don't want to throw the baby out with the bathwater. If you have great sentiment analysis using BERT, don't try to rinse repeat it with GPT 3 or 4 because it's new and shiny. Find other uses that are to the strengths of that technology.
Right, and it can be computationally expensive to put things through a general purpose large language model when that really isn't necessary or even efficient in terms of what operation you're trying to.
Well, and that's an interesting point because like one of the deltas between GPT 3.5 and GPT 4 is the number of, I guess, individual linguistic data points. I don't remember the specific term of art, but that does have an exponential increase on the computational power required, aka the cost and time. So you really have to be sure that that is the type of technology you need or you're wasting time and money.
Absolutely. The interesting thing about the ability to effectively and dynamically summarize and specify the kinds of information you're looking for in a particular information source is that it can accomplish the work that we would once upon a time have relegated to attorneys, document reviewers.
Well, baby attorneys.
Right. And a lot of people will say, are you scared of this? Is this going to make lawyers obsolete? And I say I'm not afraid of it. And I don't think people were genuinely afraid of the calculator, the graphing calculator, or the computer. Because all these things have allowed us to do greater and more impressive things.
I agree.
And so, once upon a time, it was like, no, long division is the only way to go. And
well, wasn't it? I don't remember if it was. I think Socrates was saying that the written word, because you weren't forced to do rote memorization, was going to make people dumber, right?
Right.
Like every evolution of technology, people think, oh, people are going to get less intelligent. It's like, no, your intelligence and the skills you're learning may evolve. And I think I would never be afraid of robot lawyers, but I am afraid of the Jaimes of the world, the people that are embracing technology and leveraging it, if I'm not doing it myself as well. And by afraid, I mean a little envy and definitely want to have the FOMO and do the same thing.
Well, absolutely. And I think the thing is to trust but verify, because it's important to have the technology to make our lives easier, but you can't substitute human judgment with technology. So it is much more interesting to say, show me things that are interesting. And then you can take in this knowledge. It may have some biases, but you're taking in knowledge.
It's a starting point.
But it's a starting point. It isn't the substitute for a full and exhaustive investigation, but it helps you get to the low-hanging fruit sooner. And it does give you the opportunity to evaluate information or figure out what the key pieces of information to start with are. And then it can lead to a deeper and more interesting investigation.
Well, even if I'm writing something, say it's a topic I know a little bit about, I'll type it in ChatGPT and be like, all right, what are the 5 things I should be thinking about? Then I use those output to guide my research, where then I look for citation, where then I'm digging in deeper. But it's a helpful, like I don't have to Google for 30 minutes to figure it out. I can spend 30 seconds and then have a more logical approach when I'm researching.
As the models get more complex, they probably will be less distinguishable from actual human authors. But right now we're at a point where ChatGPT is often the intern.
Yeah.
It's like, hey, intern, why don't you give me some ideas to get started with this project? And it will give you a whole bunch of good ideas and a whole bunch of bad ideas, but at least you have a menu to work with. And, is it a college level intern, a high school level intern? Well, that really depends on the subject and its ability to, you know, have a domain in that area.
So I have a hot take. How different is it starting with a ChatGPT than starting with a first year who's copy and pasting something that's not quite relevant to the case and then editing the heck out of it? Like, it might not be that different of a starting point in terms of like the quality. You're going to want to supervise it, quality check it, validate it, and not trust the final output of a first year regardless.
Yeah, so I think we should separate what ChatGPT can do, where a lot of its information is coming from, actually almost all of its information is coming from its training data, which it keeps telling us is
Twitter.
2021, even though it seems to know a whole lot about 2022 and 2023. But, you know, the systems that are being developed are trying to capitalize on ChatGPT's ability to understand language, but rely on its information sources as the documents you feed into it or the data store that you are having it analyze. So the interesting thing is that a lot of people conflate ChatGPT and its hallucinations with and you know all that is in its training data and all that isn't, with the sort of experience that you have when you are using, you know, the GPT model by tying a server instance into it and you're telling
Which is
it,
night and day different.
which is very different, where you're relying on its ability to understand language, but you're saying, actually, the documents that you are supposed to base your answers on are the documents I have provided you. And so there are, you know, and this will increasingly be the case because GPT and other large language models are becoming available to people throughout the marketplace. And we all know that GPT is, you know, sort of an Azure-bound existence, and many of our platforms that we know and love are in AWS.
Yeah.
So there's going to be a lot of other models.
I wonder if there's going to be like an LLM arms race. It feels like there might be. It feels like we're already in it.
Yes. Already the advanced law degree has been supplanted by GPT as what LLM stands for.
Actually, you know what? You're right. That's crazy. I was just
because it used to just be like,
I bet if I was to Google it, that would be the first.
Yeah.
Oh, that's crazy. Well, what's your advice, I guess, for someone that's like seeing this deluge of information about GPT-3 and 4 and 5, and it's just like, what the heck's going? Like, what guidance do you have for someone who's like, all right, I just want to kind of wrap my arms around this?
Well, I think the thing we have to take stock of is that this is a very nascent technology in the sense that it has existed for a long time, large language models, literally for about a decade, if not longer, depending on how you define a large language model. And the thing is the implementation that has caught on, that has been so interesting to the world, is one where there's very little barrier to entry.
Well, it looks a lot like a Google screen. You have one open box, a free text field, and you interact with it, which feels very familiar, very safe.
Right. And it's that kind of barrierless interface that made the iPhone triumph over the keyboard-based phone, that made Google triumph over the curated collection that required a whole lot of clicking to get to where you needed to. And so I think what we're seeing is a revolution in terms of interface design and the idea that the barrier between the technology and the user can be solved by using natural language, but natural language in a way that there's comprehension rather than it going, okay, you know, like you asked Jeeves, you know, it would have just discarded parts of your query, figured out what the keywords you're asking about, and then ran it as a standard. Although there's an interesting article about how, you know, the Ask Jeeves people were right about what people were looking for in an interface. And it's true. They were right. And this is sort of the triumph. But, you know, in terms of legal, people are willing to put in the hard work, but, you know, with a limited amount of resources, It's like, do you really want to spend it all in your e-discovery platform, or do you want that to be a frictionless place? And so I think the more that intuitive interface becomes part of the way that legal platforms, especially because it's so information heavy.
I mean, that's why I changed our logo or tagline from All In on AI, which we still are, to Human-Centered AI for Lawyers, because the human has to be first and foremost in thinking of the design, how they're going to use it, how they're going to get information, or you end up with something engineering beautiful that lawyers hate, that they can't get the information they want out of. You've got to make it like intuitive.
Right, absolutely intuitive, frictionless, no barrier to entry, because if it requires a training, then, I mean, okay, a training to become a power user into that will always be there. But if it requires a training to just use the basic functionality of a system, that's a problem. Although I will say that the cloud-based platforms that currently exist are very smartly designed. I know one in particular that has a very nice user interface where, you know, things are defined, categorized, delineated, and taxonomized in a way that makes intuitive sense. So I think we're getting to the point with the cloud-based platforms that the core interface isn't the problem. Although I will say that, you know, searching still could be improved using, you know, a true linguistic approach to saying, I want all the documents that.
Yeah, it makes sense. I mean, I think you've got to always kind of be innovating and improving and kind of moving to that next step. Otherwise, you just sort of become complacent.
Absolutely.
So, as I always say, this is a sprint and not a marathon. We're at the 1 yard line. Time for my favorite question. What is your mic drop moment? Say someone's turning in for the first time. They're hearing what you've got to say, Jaime, or hearing about Seyfarth. What is the one kernel of awesome you want them to take away?
Well, I think all in all, we have to remember that technology will replace us, but the us it's going to replace is the us we don't enjoy. It's going to be the menial sort of rote sort of tasks that keep us from doing the things that we would rather, that time that we would rather spend doing truly important things. Not the least of which is spending time with our families. But in terms of our cases,
I mean, depends. I don't know. I'm kidding.
You know, figuring out, you know, all the defenses available, or evaluate all the claims at issue in the case, because there's some things that just fall to the wayside because there's only so much you can do as you prepare. So I think it's going to help us, as you've said in many contexts, AI is not to do the work of attorneys for them. It is to give someone that bionic ability to do more with less.
Become the Iron Man, you know?
Become the Iron Man. And so my view is that we should not be afraid, but we should be afraid of folks who overstate what AI is going to be able to do, because we will always need the decision makers. Otherwise, we are going to be left with something that is incomplete and reflectant only of templatization.
Yeah. Then it will become, specialist of none, you know, like a master of everything, specialist of none, or something like that. So.
Absolutely.
Well, I think that's a good mic drop, you know, trust but verify the technology, embrace it.
No, it's machine overlords replace us, but the us we want replaced are the us that we don't love being.
Or it's the us that aren't using technology and burying their head, and you know what? Too bad, so sad, Bob.
Well, oh, Bob.
Or Joe, or
No, before Clippy was Bob.
Well, I still think that the integration of ChatGPT into Microsoft is going to be uber Clippy. I'm trademarking it now.
Can you get a car through it?
Maybe. Well, I don't think I can have a better closing line than that for our mic drop moment. This has been live from New York. This is TECHNOCAT Live with Jaime Raba of Seyfarth. And you know what? The mic is dropped. We're out. On to the next one. Stay tuned. Woo.